So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really nice to see so many familiar faces, and we're really glad to finally be at this point where we can launch the Town is the Garden chapbook collection after about 2 years of slowly trying to get them published. So it's very nice to be at this point. So I'll just start and I'll introduce myself and the project, and then the schedule. And Robin from Devon Projects will also run through some of the sort of quick Devon Projects housekeeping stuff for being on Zoom. So unfortunately, I don't think we're able to do live captioning, but we're going to try and do audio descriptions throughout. So my name is Joss Allen. I have pale skin, blonde hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a green and brown jumper. And I'm sitting in a room, and behind me on the wall there's a picture of a ship. And Caroline, would you like to introduce yourself?
So hi, I'm Caroline Gatt, and I worked with Joss on the project, for those of you who don't know me, and I'm also, I'm in Huntley at the moment. I have pale skin, brown hair, wearing blue jumpers, and the background is brown doors and my daughter's drawing. And looking forward to sharing this evening with you very much.
So Robin, did you want to quickly do any Devon Projects kind of stuff?
Sure, thanks Joss. I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Robin. I work at Devon Projects. I'm currently in the office. I have light skin and dark hair with currently very rosy cheeks, and a bright blue jumper that's almost the exact same shade as Caroline's. And for Devon Projects, on the housekeeping side, I would just say Joss has already mentioned that the meeting's being recorded, so keep your camera off if that's not something you want to be involved with. But we are taking questions, and we'll have time for questions at the end. If you could just fire them into the group chat, I'll make sure that they find their way onto the panel later on tonight. And if you could keep yourselves muted while the speakers are presenting as well, that would be great. I'm also just going to share an online code of conduct that we have at Devon Projects in the chat with everyone. And that's all for me.
Thanks, Robin. So I'll just quickly introduce the project, just by a short little bit of text that appears in the chapbooks itself, and then after that I'll run through the schedule for the rest of the evening. So for 3 years, the Town is the Garden team could be found at the margins of the garden. Amongst the weeds and compost heaps, we explored what it might mean to think with the garden. Through crafting and caring for gardens, vegetable plots and orchards, we attempted to rethink how Huntly, a small town in the northeast of Scotland, might feed itself as it faces up to the global climate and ecological emergency. Through the processes of learning and sharing skills in relation to growing food, from planting seeds to preserving the harvest, we investigated these moments of collective action as opportunities to not only learn to feed ourselves, but also to pay attention to the entanglement of human and more than human worlds. We asked, how might the garden be a site of both resistance and resilience, a place for thinking and doing ecology otherwise? The Town is the Garden began in 2017 with myself, Camille Sineau, Lindy Young, and was later joined by Caroline Gatt and Rhian Davies. And tonight we are launching a series of 7 chapbooks which came out of the project. And we're going to have a number of readings from some of the contributors from the chapbooks. So we have with us Dawn Finch, Joe Crowdy, and Jonathan Baxter. And alongside them, we also had in the chapbooks contributions from Eleanor Brown, Alexandra Falter, Maria Puig de la Bella Casa, and Elisabetta Rattolino. The cover illustrations for the chapbooks were done by Jamie Johnson. And we'd like to thank everyone at Devon Projects for supporting us through the project in multiple ways. So thank you very much. And we'd also like to thank Footprint Workers Co-op for their printing skills. They did the printing and the binding. They're a workers co-op based down in Leeds. And also to our publishers, Intellect Books, who are based down in Bristol, and to all our funders as well. So Aberdeenshire Council, Action Earth, Climate Challenge Fund, Community Growing Fund, Finney Scott Foundation, Groundwork, and Grow Wild. And a special shout out to Yvonne Billymore, Richard Muscat, Mariuccia Muscat, for all kinds of care, encouragement, and support throughout. Thank you very much. So the plan is that I'll begin and I'll read a short story from one of these chapbooks. That'll then be followed by Joe Crowdy, who's going to read a section of one of the texts that he contributed to the chapbook series, collection. Then Dawn Finch is going to read 2 of her poems, which she contributed. Then Jonathan Baxter will talk a bit about his contribution in the project Future Fruit. And then at the end, Robin is going to host a kind of in conversation quickly between Caroline and myself, a couple of questions, and then we'll open it up to the wider audience if anyone has any questions. That'll be the time. So we're hoping to do it all in about 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we'll try to be quite. We'll try and wrap it up in that time because we're not going to have a break, and we're aware that it's quite a long time to spend on Zoom. So I will begin with a short story as a way of kind of further introducing the Town is the Garden project. And this appears in the chapbook Story 2. Town is the Garden is down with the worms. After 3 years of thinking and making with the garden, we're returning to the compost heap. From this incredible heap, we first emerged and began with a party. In glasshouses, allotments, orchards, and empty shops, we planned gardens together, crafting gardens of possibilities and possible gardens of kinship. While our seeds were germinating, we went foraging food for free. We found rhubarb, planted along railways long ago, and elderflower everywhere. Intoxicated by their heady scent, we began our dance with the seasons. Through the seasons of weeds, we learned stories from plants in all the wrong places and became collaborators in contaminating diversity. Weeds followed us wherever we went, and we followed them. From little or nothing, we found companionship with mushrooms, and they showed us abundance from waste. Again, we parted. Mapping the soils of Huntly, we travelled through communities from below, composting as we went, singing, "We are all compost, citizens of decay and lovers of worms." From old ways with new hands, we wove stories and memory together into gathering baskets for harvests still to come. We practiced thinking like a forest, performing possible paths towards more than human communicative habits. In the queer garden of abundant possibilities, we considered what practices of tending towards or tending for plants can teach us about the way we pay attention to our surroundings and to one another. In fallow months, we were glad to have bread. We found companionship through kneading yeasty communities of Saccharomyces cerevisiae with our own. With humour and hopefulness, we cooked our way through a cataclysm. Again, we parted. We gathered round the future hearst, fomenting and fermenting with microbial cultures. In the town square, we assembled, plotted and dreamed beyond local and global of regenerative agriculture and diverse food economies. We feasted on pit-fired vegetables cooked in the earth. We travelled round the table and round the world, sharing stories of and with food, from local to global and back again. When the harvest was bountiful, whatever surplus we had, we gifted, swapped or shared. An alternative economy in an empty shop. We bartered 1 cabbage for 5 apples, half a dozen eggs for 3 lucky charms, the promise of a story for a beetroot or 2. Courgettes became chutney, blackcurrants sweetened to jam, fireweed tamed and dried into tea. Oh, how life gave us apples. Many hands pressed them into juice, into cider, into vinegar, into a tradition. After we had our fill of the harvest, we made plans for the next, conspiring with seeds against those who would patent and privatize earthly knowledge. In the orchard, we became entangled with future fruit, reanimating and rethinking with Patrick Gittins towards a multi-species commons. With Gittins, we walked through deep time to the future now, from aeons to apple trees. Oh, how we got cosmic and biodiverse. Across generations, we told stories in the orchard, ate, drank, and celebrated what they had given us. With care, we tended to broken branches and rabbit-bitten boles, and coaxed the trees into another year of harvest. Carrier bags full of apples, crab apples, green gages, plums, damsons, medlars, and a handful of hazelnuts. The orchard had it all, but not quite. Something was missing. With commoners, sharp knives, and gifted scions, we grafted new trees for a hopeful future. In the morning, over breakfast, with bleary eyes, we made field notes for surviving the future, on the entanglement of human and more than human worlds, matters of care, uncommoning nature, queer nature, lichens, learning to die in the Anthropocene, carrier bag theories, and world-wise, otherwise stories. We speculated an ecology otherwise. we stepped towards other ecological ways of being. We learned the arts of living on a damaged planet. Over lunch, we honed our skills and practice as gardeners, eyes fixed on the ground. In the evenings, with eyes wide open, we journeyed across worlds to other ecosystems and other ways of knowing. Whatever seeds we had saved, we gifted. Whatever knowledge we had gathered, we shared. And back to the heap, back to the earthworms and to their multi-species wonderland. Let's see what emerges from the humus. Okay.
Thank you, Joss. It was a bit of a memory for each one. So I think now I'm going to take over from Joss just to introduce our next contributor who will be reading, and this is Joe Crowdy. So Joe is a PhD fellow at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design, and we were really lucky that he joined us in June 2019 to give 2 workshops. And these workshops were both exploring the way that plants are involved in fostering human sensuality and intimacy. And Joe's book, his chapbook, is the Garden Chapbook, which includes an essay called Cultivating Queer Friendship and a step-by-step sort of route to making rosy pink wall trees and bushes of the garden. And Joe, really glad that you can read some of your essays for us.
Thanks, Caroline. I'm Joe. I'm just to describe myself. I have white skin, brown hair, very patchy beard, grey jumper. Yeah, so I'll begin. My text was really just a reflection on the workshops I did in Huntley. So I'm just going to read from that. In June 2019, I travelled to Huntley to deliver 2 workshops based on my 2017 article, Queer Undergrowth, which proposed a history of weeds as queer agents in the horticultural logic and social space of the garden. In the workshops, I focused on 3 historical examples of gardens that cultivated queer intimacy and which provide fertile ground for discussing our own relationships with and amongst plants. One workshop was open to the public, whilst the other was conducted with the local school's LGBTQ+ group, who were planning a new garden within the school grounds. These teenagers were an established gang, bonded through weekly meetings and shared experiences. They had created their own private space within the walls and routine of the school. Looking back on this welcoming atmosphere of good humour and camaraderie, I realised how reminiscent it was of the intimate spaces of queer friendship I had described. I began each workshop in Huntley by asking participants to describe their own emotional attachments to plants. I told them of Luce Irigarei's account of returning to the world of plants in times of emotional, social, and intellectual stress, gaining nourishment through intimacy with the vegetal world. And I told them of my own attachment to stinging nettles, omnipresent plant of my childhood, raucous resident of every wasteland and riverbank, whose virile growth and astringent scent triggers memories of secret dens, games in the undergrowth, hot white bumps on red skin. By filling the room with their own memories before I evoked more distant histories, I hoped participants would make connections between the two. The gardens I went on to describe appeared to me as a flirtatious mode of living with the past, a historiography powered by the connecting forces of desire, friendship, and vegetal life, a way of living with others differently, powered by history and plants. And after studying the shadowy garden salon of Nathalie Barney in modernist Paris, the overgrown utopia of Edward Carpenter in Victorian Derbyshire, and the windswept refuge of Derek Darman in Dungeness, we went outside to explore insights from these histories in nearby green spaces. The content of each workshop from this point diverged, but they shared a common material frame, 2 billowing sheets of dyed fabric made in an effort to conjure a tangible link to these histories. Like props or fake relics, these pink sheets emulated the rosy damask walls of Nathalie Barney's boudoir. But they were also a personal, private citation. 4 years earlier, on a site visit to a Sussex farm where we were soon to exhibit together, a close friend and I spent an exasperating relationship testing night with a third older friend, struggling to keep torrential rain out of a makeshift tent. In the morning, whilst our clothes dried at the farmhouse, we silently collected tubfuls of blackberries from the hedgerows, took turns mashing them with our feet, then boiled them over a camping gas in the fixing liquor of our urine. Huddled in the caustic stench, we dyed a 5-metre length of linen and hung it to dry from a nearby oak. Later, we filmed ourselves carrying this rosy sail up the steep blue grass slope of a meadow, jumping and dancing to avoid patches of wet nettles. This was an intensely intimate moment of friendship, sharing the same discomfort, exhaustion, and excitement. We had literally stirred ourselves together, fixing our relationship into a physical material. 4 years later, I remembered this as I reperformed the dyeing process alone, combining my urine with the oxalic acid of rhubarb leaves. It was too early for blackberries, so I collected rose petals, bay leaves, and the burgundy foliage of copper beeches, tall trees which paid me back for stealing their leaves, with the deep graze on my thumb, which later leaked pus every time I plunged my hands into the dye. I brought the new panels of fabric to Huntley, and in each workshop, we hung them from branches to enclose temporary places to talk, a fleeting architecture of foliage, flesh, and memory. With the student group, this became a space to explore design ideas for their own garden. I asked them to discuss the activities it might host, the references it might express, how it might reflect their collective interests. I wanted them to consider the essential steps in planning any garden, understanding the material, environmental, and historical conditions of a site, choosing plants according to how their habits might match the habits of the garden's users, and deciding how much control and care the garden will require. But on top of this, how such steps could be approached from a specifically queer perspective. Could the garden be a way of cultivating queer friendships, challenging standards of good taste, or performing connections with queer histories, the garden as a mnemonic device? With the second group, I tried a more speculative activity, exploring the intimate reciprocal relationships between plant and human bodies. Gardens, I argue, are both records of accumulated attention and places with the potential to shift our thinking about desire and care, lust and labour. After we had trodden a circle in a lush crop of ground elder beneath a beech at the boundary of town and woodland, and gathered inside our pink and greeny walls, I recited an account of my attempt, working as a gardener in London, to disentangle an old rambling rose from a musty mass of ivy. In order to prune this ball of ivy, I had to climb right inside it, grope blindly along its hairy branches, half searching for joints where I could cut, half locking our embrace to stop myself from falling. I began to understand its internal structural logic and history of growth, from young exploratory vine to heaving morass, writ in aged wooden elbows. For a moment, the plant which I was destroying held my weight. My body and attention were entirely consumed within it, dependent on it. That evening, lying in bed, the outlines of my limbs were distorted by undulating new forms of bites and stings from the ivy's invertebrate inhabitants, strangely firm and tight to touch, as if not entirely my own. I hoped, with the group, to reflect on Catriona Sandilands' speculation whether there are ways in which some material relationships to plants enact forms of living and relating that resist, interrupt, or at least cause friction within heteropatriarchy. Diane Chisholm suggests that nature writer Ellen Meloy's imagined sexual encounter with the flower of a prickly pear cactus achieves something akin to this, an erotic ethical affiliation between human and non-human life. Meloy asks, what is it that the prickly pear desires, how it loves the basalt rock on which it grows? If I desire to be devoured by a ball of ivy, what does the ivy desire of me? To leave it alone, or to become a support on which it can finally obtain its ultimate desire, to metamorphosize from climber to shrub? I asked the participants to take turns guiding a partner, eyes closed, toward an individual plant, and to introduce their partner's hand to that plant, taking care that they didn't damage it or themselves. I asked those with their eyes closed to think of the plant as a body and to describe to their partner the textures and shapes of its limbs and skin. Next, I asked them to analyze the plant visually. What was missed in the first encounter? What was now invisible? Finally, I asked the pairs to speculate on the place of their plant within a local economy of desire and attention. To what environmental qualities did it attend? How could they read this in the plant's habit, how it occupied the ground? How did it provide an habitable ground for other organisms? And how had humans paid attention to it? Was it planted or self-sown, pruned, fertilized, or bred in a certain way? Back in our beachy salon, one participant commented on how few of these questions she could answer. Rather than suggesting a sensual assessment alone could satisfy such questions, my intention was to get the participants thinking differently about how they know plants. Michael Marder laments how, in European history, post-Linnaean nominalism has been the prevalent method of thinking about plants. To know a plant often means to name it, to assign it an exact place in a dead, albeit highly differentiated system, transforming a unique individual organism into a mere example of its species. An encounter with a plant must not simply be an attempt to fit it into a human world, but rather an acknowledgement of another world. Whilst fundamentally inaccessible, we can try to bring this world closer through recognizing, like Edward Carpenter did over 100 years ago, its commonalities with our own, such as the shared plant and human capacity for growth, change, and decay. We can also recognize where plants surpass human capacities, admiring their rootedness in a place, their incredible attentiveness to what is going on around them, light, heat, moisture, movement, vibration. By engaging with plants as participants in the ensemble of life, rather than a mesh of quantifiable objects of productive potentialities, we can gain a richer sense of our own bodies and our own thinking. I was also interested in how these encounters with plants were mediated by a third human party, or conversely, how the intimate experience of being guided by a human partner was mediated by a plant. I had first experienced this exercise, this plant touching exercise, as a spontaneous gesture on a marshland boardwalk with my boyfriend at the time. With absolute trust in each other's guidance, we took turns walking stretches with our eyes closed. When the long anticipated moment of contact finally came with the body of a plant, it almost felt like the glossy, rough, or downy surfaces I was touching were part of his own body, or that the supple or stiff limbs were somehow of his world, not mine. In the woods of Huntley, I hoped that the mutual experience of this tactile activity would create some impression of the plant-mediated intimacy between friends I had described in the gardens of Edward Carpenter, Natalie Barney, and Derek Jarman. That's the end.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you so much for reading that. Yeah, I really recommend that everyone, if you're able to get a copy of them, you'll be able to read Joe's essay in full, and it's a really beautiful text. So thank you for sharing a bit of it with us. And so next up, we have a reading from Dawn Finch, and Dawn contributed to one of the chapbooks called Seeds. So I'm holding in my hand an A6 booklet on grey paper, and printed on it are the words Seeds and Dawn Finch. And on the back, we have a beautiful drawing from Jamie Johnson of a sort of blue seed-like shape with lots of intricate kind of drawings inside of it, and an orange kind of squiggle that winds around it. And so Dawn wrote a kind of a guide to seed saving, but it's kind of anecdotal and talks about Dawn's experiences as a gardener, and goes through some of the kind of the basic seed saving approaches, and some of the kind of the easiest ones to start off with. And amongst this are some of Dawn's beautiful poetry as well. And so Dawn likes to regard herself as a child of the land, and her ancestors were gamekeepers and farmers. She grew up in acres of landscaped rose gardens, as her father was one of the UK's most respected rose experts, and her sister is a renowned floral artist. With a passion for fruit and vegetables, Dawn is affectionately regarded as the odd one out of the family. Dawn is a curator of the Strathbogie Seed Collective seed library, and is also the cook and owner of Plot 9 Preserves and Neep and Okra. She is a best-selling author of non-fiction books for children, and is a poet and twice winner of the Brian Nisbet Poetry Award. And so we were really pleased that Dawn could contribute to the publications. So Dawn, would you like to read a couple of your poems for us?
Thank you, Joss. I was just so happy to be part of this project, and I think my book is probably the littlest of them, but I'm delighted that I think I have the nicest cover. So thank you very much, Jamie. I love the cover so much. I'll introduce myself. I am very pale with silver hair, and I'm currently wearing a stripy jumper and a very bright orange scarf. My background is of things that warm you, which are books and a fireplace, and I work with nourishment, be that hearts, minds, bodies and bellies. So I'm very delighted to share my poems with you. I wrote 2 poems especially for this chapbook, and they are about seeds and about growing, and the first one is called Seed. I hold the future in my palm, bloom dried, past weathered to hard skin that speaks in silent whisper of soil and sun and rain, and of seasons chorused through by insect hum. After all our shared challenges, there is this tiny thing. In the circle of this journey, in this small hard casing, is all the earth. And my other poem that I wrote is, I'm a very keen allotment here, and I share an allotment site that is very beautiful, and Caroline, I'm going to miss you at the allotment site very much. And the allotment is a very special place to me. I don't have a garden as such, so really the allotment is an important place for me, both for my mental health, my physical health, and the health of my purse and my table. And so I wrote this one about my allotment, and it's called Allotted Time. In this place I linger, bone tired, sun warmed, muddied and with soil beneath my nails, and sun freckled across my skin. The day rolls on through its palette of blue. I linger here while summer's tail flicks at autumn's feet, and the changing seasons draw my plants to seed. A promise of years to come in their curled pods and faded flowers. Mouse nibbled, bee blessed, I breathe deep and watch the light fade on the boughs and pretend not to see the shrews steal through the peas and the birds digging between the beets, unwilling to leave, in this place I linger. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Dawn. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you.
Thank you.
The other thing is, one of the things that I wanted to say was why seed saving and why this was so personal to me. And I ended my chapbook with a statement of why it was so personal to me. And for me, there is something deeply personal in this cyclical process of taking a plant to seed. The plant and I did this together in a symbiotic relationship. The plant fed me, and in my gratitude, I will do my best to help it perpetuate its life cycle. Thanks to the journey we have taken together, I have learnt the needs of this plant and learnt how it lasted the wind and the rain. I can tell if it will enjoy certain types of feed and if it likes an open, breezy spot or a warm, sheltered place. This plant and I went this process together, and this makes me feel a bond to the plants I bring to seed. At the end of the season, when I hold that seed, there is in my mind the knowledge that this is another beginning, and the plant and I will see each other again. When it cracks its tiny shell and reaches those first green shoots up through the dark, damp soil seeking the sunlight, I will be there waiting patiently for it again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dawn. Okay, so next up, we're going to hear from Jonathan Baxter. So as part of the Town is the Garden project, we started looking after a community orchard, and we invited Jonathan Baxter and Sarah Gittins up to help us try to figure out how we could better care for the orchard and to find a future for it within the kind of communities of Huntly. And so they joined us for a project which was called Future Fruit, and it was sort of an attempt to rethink how an existing orchard could be thought in response to the current climate and ecological crisis, and was particularly inspired by the thinking of Patrick Geddes. So Jonathan Baxter and Sarah Gittins braid individual art practices with a collaborative commitment to addressing the climate and ecological crisis. Then, since 2009, Jonathan has combined the roles of artist, curator, and peer educator to deliver a series of participatory art projects and peer learning programs. These include Dundee Artist in Residence from 2009 to 2012, Dundee Urban Orchard from 2013 to 2017, and Future Fruit, which was from 2019 to 2020. Since 2012, Jonathan has worked under the auspices of A&E, a conceptual framework that braids the terms accident and emergency, art and ecology, art and education. Jonathan's current projects include an embedded artist residency at St Mary's Episcopal Cathedral in Edinburgh, and a communities walking residency with Art Walk Projects Edinburgh, which is from 2021 and is ongoing. He supports various aspects of Extinction Rebellion's arts coordination and has a research interest in the philosophy of Gillian Rose. Sarah Gittins is a visual artist working across a variety of media with a particular focus on drawing and printmaking. Her work explores issues of social and ecological justice with a focus on climate change, land use, and food sustainability. Sarah's images create a space where the activities of everyday life encounter incidents of global environmental concern, bringing those issues, which are often pushed to the edges of consciousness, into the here and now of personal awareness. Sarah is interested in the capacity of image making to enable engagement, conversation, and action for change. Sarah is a passionate art educator and currently leading the figure course at Leith School of Art, and developing a programme of plant-based drawing adventures with A and E. So Jonathan and Sarah contributed to one of the chapbooks, which is called Orchard. I'm holding an A6 book, and on the cover of it is written the words Orchard, Joss Allen, Jonathan Baxter, and Sarah Gittins. And on the cover is an illustration by Jamie Johnson, which has a number of different figures of trees, apples, different fruits, lots of different characters in black and blue. And Jonathan and Sarah together contributed a text called Future Fruit, Rethinking Huntly from a Giddisian Perspective, which is a sort of an account of, or based on the Future Fruit project. And so Jonathan is going to tell us a little bit about the text.
Hello, thank you very much. So I'm a sort of knackered looking man in his late 40s, currently suffering COVID-19. So I look like I haven't been out of the house for a week, which is about right. That's what I look like, and there are books behind me. This is very serious. Can I just make an observation? I'm not reading anything, so I'm going to go off piste, unfortunately, which is possibly what I do. But I just want to point out that this is a wonderful celebration. I just want to say thank you to Joss, Caroline, and everybody else. I don't think it's been mentioned yet, but congratulations! This is a launch, and they're fabulous. I haven't managed to read them all yet. I got them this morning, but I've had a good look, and I'm really excited to read them. So just want to add a bit of Joss mentioned. What was it? Parties, humour, hopefulness. We've had the erotic from Joe. I mean, you know, I think Town is the Garden. That's what it's about, and I think that's kind of what I want to celebrate really today. Now, in terms of the text, well, first of all, Future Fruit was definitely a collaboration with my partner Sarah, and also we turned up with our, God knows how old he was then, but he's 2 and a half now. So we turned up with a small child. So it was a really sort of generous and risky thing for Town is the Garden, I think, to invite us in with a small child. And I think that's important when we're thinking about these ecological issues. So again, I just want to sort of a call out for that. Sarah's not here, she's looking after Ben, so that's the division of our labour at the moment. What do I want to say about the text? The text is, first of all, I'm first and foremost an artist and a curator and not a writer. So I would say critically that the text is a bit clunky. But what it tries to do is it tries to kind of lay out what Future Fruit was. So it's, you know, an artist talking about their practice. It points out some of the, it wasn't fully realised, the project wasn't fully realised for various reasons. And so what it tries to do is introduce a hospitable critical critique of maybe why one of the reasons why that occurred, why it was short-circuited. Now, I want to be really clear about this, that this is part of Devon Project's practice. And it's worth saying, I actually begin the text by saying, by giving a little history as to why I was invited to come and do the project, why Sarah and I were invited. And it's actually coming out of a project that Devon Arts, when they were called Devon Arts, ran way back when. Who knows, 2008, possibly, something like that, called Practica. And I was very influenced by actually something in the Practica project that Devon Arts ran. So I risked in the piece called, in the text called, the volume called Orchard, this little chapbook, this shadow curator critique. So what I'll do very simply is say, so the text itself outlines what happens when 2 artists come to Huntly to explore how you might reanimate an orchard. And by reanimate, I mean really link the orchard itself, the ecology of the orchard, the biodiversity, multi-species of the orchard with the community intention within Huntly. So it's really about recombining people and you know, multi-species commoning. That was our intention. It's very you know, it's quite simple how you do that. Basically, you just bring people down to the site. You create a kind of an intimacy and a curiosity, an excitement, and that, I think personally, I think that leads to ongoing forms of care. So the real intention of the project was to think about social practices and the sort of social practices that you would need to introduce to the orchard if you actually wanted it to have longevity as a commons for Huntley. So that's really what we're looking at. And in the text, I talk about that within a democratic forum. I talk about the polis. So we're rethinking about it as a public place, but also a political space, and a space actually in which an orchard can start asking complex, difficult, awkward political questions about the future of Huntley locally and how that maps out globally in terms of neoliberal capitalism, if you like, if you want to put it in those broad brushstroke terms. That's what we tried to do. It may or may not have been hugely successful. We also introduced, what was perhaps innovative, perhaps interesting, is that we tried to put a bit of flesh on the bones of Devon Project's understanding of Gittins. So from the outside, and I say definitely from the outside, you could say that Devon Projects sort of has a couple of Gittisian catchphrases, but it's not entirely clear where the substance of that is. So I'm not saying it's not there, I'm just saying it's not entirely clear where it is. If I understand Devon Projects, it's definitely about the slow, what happens when you create a project that really responds and listens to the town, people, the organizations. So it's a long, slow project. It's not necessarily the experimental projects that the artists animate. That's part of it, but it's about being on the ground. It's really partly a curatorial role and the organizational practice of being in Huntley. And I'm very aware of that. So the critique I offered is really asking whether, if you think about the social and economic interventions that Devon Projects has made, for example, recently buying the shop, for example, these are definitely social and economic interventions that create a kind of Gittisian model of what a place, work and folk synthesis would look like. But potentially what it lacks is sort of deep dwelling work within a kind of an ecological practice. This is all very confusing. You'd have to read the text to know what I'm talking about. It's quite simple, really. If you work in orchard, if you work anything, if you work in allotment, if you collect seeds, you have a kind of, quite simply a relationship, whether you want to call it an erotic relationship as Joe would, but you basically have an intimacy, a love of that, that other ecology, that more than human world. And that's really what Future Fruit was about. In the wider context, of course, it can also look at issues to do with food sovereignty, and issues around, in particular for Huntley, issues around how we think about food, how we grow our food, how we source our food, how we distribute food. Issues of production, basically, are really extraordinarily important political issues that actually can unite people across the political spectrum, if you think about it from climate change. So one of the events that we ran, you may have, for example, a Conservative local MP or MSP who is a farmer. And so actually across that political spectrum, you often get people on, say, this is being a bit polemic, but let's say the right, you might think are going to be less concerned around issues about distributive justice, who actually understand what distributive justice and economics means from a food sovereignty point of view. I've probably said enough, other than to simply say, beyond the project itself, which was to animate an orchard and create these sort of long-term embedded care within the community, so it was always to hand on that care to the community. We had thought that we would also create a, let's say, a pseudo science fiction graphic novel for Huntley, which was Gittins coming back to life and revisiting Huntley, and so we did that working with Petra, who I think is no longer with Devon Projects, but was the community, let's say, community and health, was it, worker. And we asked Petra to be Patrick Geddes. So we essentially brought Geddes back to life. Petra performed Geddes. And really that was what we were wanting to leave in Huntley, the idea that Geddes is actually a role, a persona, a performance, a mask, and that we can all don that red beard, whatever our gender, sexuality, identity, and re-perform that Geddesian vision. I've said enough. Sorry if it was badly said.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jonathan. That was excellent, and also especially because you are, I guess not feeling very well. So we really appreciate that you were able to join us. So thank you. And I'll just say a quick word that there are some incredible illustrations that go alongside the essay, which, like Jamie's illustrations, Zoom will not do justice, but Jonathan is showing one of those, which is they've been done in Riso, and they're black and blue, and they're really fantastic. So we're really glad that to have these. So this is an image of a discussion taking place in the town square. There's an image of an apple tree, and then a collection of people having a discussion all around a sign which asks, "What is our vision for food in Huntley?" And on the floor is a diagram of Patrick Geddes, one of his thinking machines. And so people that don't know Patrick Geddes, he was an Aberdeenshire-born polymath. I think he studied biology, but was kind of latterly known as a sort of a town planner. And his influence has been quite wide, but I think he's sort of perhaps not known so well. People might know of him through a phrase which was kind of attributed to him, but whether or not he actually said it is unclear. The think global, act local. So yeah, thank you so much, Jonathan, and also for reminding us that it's supposed to be a celebration. I think on Zoom, I find these things so difficult to, especially when you don't really know who you're talking to, and it's a shame that we couldn't have it in person. But thank you. So we're gonna, for the last bit of this, I think we'll just open it up to questions, because we have maybe like 15 minutes left. So if anyone has any questions for us, now is the time.
For any of the contributors, right, who are here, and to remind everyone that Elisabetta is here as well, and anyone else.
Well,
and Camille is here.
I do have a question. It's actually I've just thought of this from your contribution, Jonathan, and thank you so much everyone who's contributed to this tonight. I mean, I know these books, they are going to be widely available from today, from Devon Project's website and a variety of other places, so please do get them. But you were talking about the longevity of projects, and it just reminded me of something that I read in Joss and Caroline's kind of introduction to these chapbooks, which is this story one, Joss Allen and Caroline Gatt. So the first chapbook they have here, and a beautiful illustration on the back again. And you talk, Joss, about almost a kind of ecological awakening or something similar in the White Wood project. And this is a real experimentation in 300 years to grow, and it just got me thinking about the actual inception of Town as a Garden. And I know we have Camille here and maybe a few others, so we've talked about the practices and the provocations around Town as a Garden, but I wonder if you could just spare a little bit about how this came about for you.
How the project started?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess it how did it start? There's lots of different ways it started, I guess. I think there'd been ongoing conversations at Devon Projects about, and I think it was Claudia that first kind of raised this idea. So Claudia Zeisk, the founding director of Devon Projects, first raised the idea of, as well as having artists in residence, I wonder what it'd be like to have a gardener in residence. And I think that was one of the first things that, one of the things anyway that led to the project. And so we were quite interested in, in working with a gardener. And so we applied to the Climate Challenge Fund, who kind of supported the project. They were the main funder. And things kind of developed from there into what became quite a messy 3-year project, loosely looking at growing food.
The kind of the goals, it seems, of maybe the Town as a Garden shifted quite a bit from the beginning, from that Climate Challenge Fund application to your kind of final outcomes, I guess. So with these books in particular, for all of the contributors, but particularly, I guess, Joss and Caroline, what would you want your intention for these chapbooks to be now they're out in the world?
Robin, I think probably I'm going to answer in a way which doesn't answer you at all, because I just realized that actually all the people who had come to all those workshops, people from Huntly, people who visited us from elsewhere, I think this is probably the first time they're sort of in the same room, some of them, and in a way, like,
it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, I wish we had, in a way, the books are a way to get everybody together as much as we could, because there were so many people who contributed, right? But like, if only we could have got everybody together, like everybody who had done a workshop, who had come to the workshops, who had come to the People's Assembly on food, you know, for the food plan. And in a way, I think, like, for me, it really does feel like a celebration, because it's like getting people together, you know. It's really, I mean, silently, right, with everybody on mute.
Everybody's cheering, I think, silently, Caroline. I do know we only have about 10 minutes left, so if anyone has any burning questions, please just jump in. Jonathan, was that you?
Comment. I mean, can I risk answering your question in a way that Joss and Caroline aren't going to, which is, I mean, I'm just picking up again on something that Joe said about resist, interrupt, and cause friction. I mean, whether this is a good thing or not, I'm not saying whether it's a good thing. I'm just saying it strikes me that if it's climate challenge funding, and, you know, it had a kind of clear directive of what the project's meant to do. I mean, I guess, you know, Caroline and Joss really sort of lent into the ability of the arts to be this, what Jelinek calls this aimless praxis, you know, so it sort of interrupts, resists a little bit some of the, you know, if you like, goal-oriented outcomes of what you might expect a kind of food growing project to be, you know. And I think that's just, I'm just acknowledging that. I think that's really important to say, and that is, of course, the space that the arts have allowed. It doesn't mean to say it doesn't feed into that. You know, you've got sort of seeds there, you've got, you know, cultivation of an orchard, you've got composting. But I think that something about resisting and getting disrupted and entangled with, and actually really asking ourselves questions, I think is really important. So I don't know whether Joss and Caroline would agree with that, but I think there's something quite important to say there.
Yeah, I think that's really important to acknowledge, Jonathan. I mean, the amount of, and like you said as well, Caroline, the amount of people that have been involved in this over 3 years. I mean, it's kind of amazing to think of how prolific this project has been, with the amount of workshops and knowledge building and skill sharing that has been involved, as well as kind of pushing these boundaries for what it means to make a project like Town as a Garden with that kind of funding. With that in mind, with such a busy 3 years, now these books have come out almost a year and a bit after the project kind of concluded, and with all of the contributors almost, you know, all over the world as well. Did any kind of major revelations or any kind of new perspectives come from that time away from the project? that's also open to all the contributors.
I think it did. I mean, I think it was a really good process to go through after a project like that to develop a set of like publications, because I think it is a good way of kind of I guess in a way like trying to take stock of what the project was. And I guess what I said earlier when we were talking was that yeah, what it made me think was that actually we should have done a lot less in the project. That was I think it sort of highlighted maybe how much we tried to do, and that actually maybe we should have done a bit less.
How about you, Caroline? Did you feel like I know you're based in Huntly still, but this process of kind of going over the whole body of work?
I want to hear from Elisabetta and Camille.
Elisabetta or Camille, would you guys be happy? Would you be happy contributing?
Hello. yeah. Like, I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Camille, and because I didn't earlier, so I'm pale skinned, bald, and with a dark beard and a black t-shirt. Currently in France, actually. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm super happy to see. It's been. I joined the project at the very beginning, the first few months with Joss, and I agree with Joss that it unfolded in quite an amazing, quite rich project that where it was quite a lot of things happening at the same time. So I'm quite happy I haven't seen the books yet, but to be here and hear all the different things that happen over time, because then for different reasons, I ended up going away and also abroad, close to all the project afterwards. But I still feel that, at least from my perspective, it had an extremely impactful. I mean, it was extremely impactful in my life, because even though I left the project, I think my relationship both to gardening and Huntly, and also the questions that were discussed and actually done in the project carried on to be with me over the years. So I'm quite happy to. It feels very nice to hear everyone now and see it, and I'm actually very curious to see and read all the different books. I agree with just maybe it was a lot. I think it feels maybe in terms of it's more of project now. I mean, I'm currently teaching, so it's a bit different, but I'm also doing a few projects, and I guess it was a very sort of tentacular project where I feel that maybe some, like by focusing on some different things, could have been in some ways quite good. It's more like as a sort of retrospection, but it's also quite nice that, because for a lot we felt like, at least at the beginning, like we were quite going with the flow of what was possible and going on and sort of spreading seeds like literally everywhere. So that's quite good. And hi to everyone, because I didn't have the chance to say hi to all the people. I know it's been a long time. Haven't been back to the UK actually since COVID started, really. So yeah, I hope to be able to come back soon.
I hope so too. Hope so. I've actually just seen that there are two. There've been two hands up that I've missed, so apologies for that. But I think Claudia had her hand up first, so I'll come to you the question.
Okay. I just wanted to say there was really a lot going on, and need to apologize that I really wasn't able to keep up with it most of the time, a lot of the time. But what should be said, that there have been a lot of spin-offs that are still around the town. You know, they're not maybe directly accredited to the Town is the Garden program, but there is still the Climate Action Group, and it has definitely influenced the setup of the Nip and Okra and the bakery. And Katrina, I don't know if she's here today, she's setting up the Huntley Food Growing Collective. And of course, the seed library and the orchard is actually still alive. I've seen people picking fruit. So that should also be kind of acknowledged, that there has been a lot of spin-off that then not always are traced back to where it actually originally comes from. And I think certainly, you know, the group of people that are more like-minded thinking about those issues has been created. And some of them are here today, and some of them just meet each other when they see each other on the square. So, okay. Thank you.
It's very nice. In the in one of the chapbooks, there's a conversation between Caroline and Joss, and they cover a lot of the spin-off projects in that, and they mention the seed library and they talk about the orchard, and that's a really, I found that a really lovely part of one of the, I think it's the thickest chapbook, it might be the first one. I think because they're by definition with chapbooks, they're not necessarily in order. It's that element of sort of, it's like a buffet of reading material. You can pick and mix and go backwards and forwards. And there's a lovely conversation between Caroline and Joss in one of those books where they cover the spin-off projects, and they talk about a bit more about all the little elements. And they talk about almost like a walk around the town of the different things that have carried on since. So thank you, Joss and Caroline. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I'll just echo that as well. They're all really good reads. I'd recommend as much for the illustrations as for the actual texts. They're beautiful. I can see Natalia's keen to jump in as well.
Well, I suppose I was actually just going to echo it, but I don't want to take up time because I wasn't part of the project. But I guess in a sort of similar vein around legacy, for someone who wasn't involved or wasn't here at all, but actually it's kind of even surprising to me how much that project has influenced the programme at Deborah Projects now. It's actually a departure point for quite a lot of our programming this year, or the next year and a half coming. And I think that's quite, I mean, it's quite an intangible legacy, I suppose, but it really is strong for us in the organisation just now.
Thanks, Natalia. Yeah, I think the ripples of Town is a Garden, or maybe I should say the shoots and the buds that have been planted over the past 3 or 4 years, they pop up in probably very unexpected places. But it's wonderful to see, to see them popping up every now and again. And I think everybody here who's been involved with Town is a Garden at some point will have one of those as well. I'm aware of time, so I'm just going to ask if there are any other contributions or things people want to share, or thanks to give for anyone in this digital room. I'll open up that now.
Elisabetta.
Good evening, everyone. It's really, 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 really a great pleasure to see again some faces that I haven't seen for so long. I'm Elisabetta. I'm a not so pale woman with short hair, and I'm in a dark bedroom hiding some clothes that still needs to be folded and ironed in the back. At least I try to. So what I just want to say is that I remember our very first conversations about the project with Joss, all the doubts about what the project was going to be, if it was art or not art. And the very, very first questions that actually to some extent really linked very much to what my PhD was about, very 1960s and 1970s questions. But nonetheless, it's really, really inspiring to see what the project has grown into. And I'm really, really looking forward to see and touch and read the different small booklets, not only to learn more about the project itself, but also to experience this new and experimental way of narration that you have been putting together over these past few months. So I'm really, really looking forward to receive these books. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Elisabetta. Yeah, I hope you get them soon. Sorry, I guess the postage to Italy takes a wee while, but you'll get them. You'll get them. But yeah, maybe we'll finish there. That's us being kind of an hour and 15 minutes. So I just wanted to thank everyone that's contributed tonight. It's been really great to have everyone here. And I'm looking forward to hearing more from people once you receive your copies, or if you buy a copy, then please do let us know what you think of them. At the moment, you can get them from the Devon Project's website, and I think they're on a special launch discount price, so get them sooner rather than later. So thank you everyone for being here, and I just wanted to, on a final note, I just wanted to thank Lindy Young, who isn't here tonight, but she was the project gardener, and she was really the driving force of the project. It would not have happened without Lindy. She was so dedicated to the project. So yeah, thank you everyone, and yeah, good night.